This tutorial will guide you through the basic functionality of using the RootCue software. To begin with, we need to add a new cue to our cue list. We can do this in a number of ways, either by going to the Cue Edit menu and selecting New Cue, or by clicking on the New Cue button at the bottom of the screen. There's also a keyboard shortcut to this feature, which is Ctrl-X. I'm going to use the tool strip item to open the New Cue menu. In this menu, you can enter as many details as you like about the cue. It is not necessary to add any information other than the cue number, which is filled in automatically for you. I'm going to give this cue the name Introduction, the description as Macbeth enters, give the act number 1 and the page number 5. As can be seen, when you click OK, the information now appears on the cue list. You can adjust the size of the columns on the cue list so you can see more or less information by dragging the bars in between the column titles. Now we have a cue, we want to add some music to it. To do this, we use the player list panel, which is this right area of the application. Here we have a player with the player ID 0. This will store the audio files which will be used in the cue. There are a number of ways of adding files to our program. The method I will use initially is the Add Sample button at the bottom of the screen. If we click Add Audio File, it brings up Windows' file management system, and we are able to choose a file, perhaps from our My Music folder, by ourselves. I'm going to add a music file. As can be seen, as the file is loaded, it is plotted. It's on the player. This is useful information as far as to see, getting an idea of what's going on in the file, so you can see when it gets louder or quieter, or when more is going on. In some cases, it can take a long time to generate this data, and you saw the progress bar, which demonstrated how much time was left before the loading would be complete. I'm now going to add some more players to this cue. To do this, I can either go to Player Edit and click New Player, or alternatively use the tool strip item, or once again the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to add 2 new players. This time I don't want to have to select each file individually, so I'm going to use the File Browser panel, which is a useful way of adding multiple audio files in one go to our project. To load the File Browser panel, I click View and then File Browser. Once again, this has a keyboard shortcut associated with it, in this case Ctrl-B. You can navigate the file browser by using the plus or minus icons next to the locations on your hard disk. For beginner users, it may be a little difficult getting used to having to start from the very base of your hard disk, which is the C drive. But if you click onto the users folder and then click your name, you will soon be back at your My Documents and be able to access your music. In this case, the file I want is stored right at the bottom of the folder list in C. I'll click this folder, and the files in this folder will appear in the panel below. I want to add the tiger sound to the second cue. To do this, I'll click on the file and then drag it onto the cue. This other sound I want to add is the sound of laughing and clapping. So once again, I click it and drag it onto the cue. Now, it would be good to hear what this sample sounds like when I play it. To listen to the sample, I can use the play button at the bottom of the screen. All samples are played at once, and the timer at the top indicates at what stage in the playback we are in. The time is in seconds and milliseconds. I've had enough of listening to this, so I'm going to click the stop button. This reverts the timer to 0. It is also possible to play the cue from part of the way in, but to do this I select the place and then click play cue. As can be seen, the playback starts from that position. I'm going to stop this again. It's worth mentioning the feature of restarting the timer. For example, if you had clicked here but actually decided you wanted to quickly play from the beginning, you can use the send cursor to start of cue button to revert the timer to 0. This saves you trying to click exactly on 0. Now, I think it's time to add some more cues to the project. To do this, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+X. The cue number is automatically filled in. This time I'm going to have the name as second entrance, the description as fighting, and the act number as Act 2, although it's more than likely that there will be several cues per act, and the page number will have been incremented slightly up to page 10. The information here, while seeming largely irrelevant, will be very useful in a full-scale production for keeping track of what cue needs to be played when. It is likely that cues will be written into the script with the relevant cue number and any other information so that they can be followed throughout the production. I'm going to click OK, and the cue appears. I'm also going to add a final cue, which is going to be called Stop Sounds, and we'll find out how this will work later. To the second cue, I'm just going to add one file, once again from the file browser, which is very quick to use once you've got it open and navigated to the folder you need. I'm going to add, since it's a sword fighting scene, it's inevitably going to be someone dying and resulting in the laughter of the victor. So I'm going to drag the insane laughter clip onto cue 0. Now, I don't want this occurring right at the start of the cue. There needs to be some fighting to take place first, even if I, at this time, don't have any sword fighting clips ready. I'm able to drag the sample so that it starts later. To do this, I hold down the control button, then click and drag, and I can move the sample along the player. It is also possible to change the start position of the sample by going to Player Edit and Edit Player, or right-clicking on the sample and going to Edit Player. Now, the start time has already been changed, but I also would like to decrease the volume of the laughter so as not to scare too many people, and make it loop so that the laughter continues for a longer amount of time. I'm going to add a loop count of 5 and add this to the player. As can be seen, the waveform is repeated 5 times on the player to indicate the number of loops. If I had ticked the loop forever box, the waveform would have repeated for as long as the longest track on the player, which sounds complicated but is simple when you use it. Having added my sample to this player, my final thing to do is to deal with the stop sounds cue. I'm not going to add any samples to this. I'm going to use it to stop the other cues. After the fight and the laughter, there's going to be an intense silence. I click Link Cue and then select the cues I wanted to stop, which in this case is both the previous cues. As can be seen, the cues are then added to the linked list. Once I've done linking cues, I can click Link Cue again, and the cues it's linked to will be stored. Now I'm ready to play, to try out the cue list I have created. I can do this using the next cue button in the tool strip, but to remove all distractions and make playing back as easy as possible, I can go to the View menu and select Show Mode. I'm also going to close the file browser as I do not need it anymore. Show mode is what we'll be typically used for an actual production. To begin with, I would wait in the production for perhaps the director or perhaps the moment in the script when the first cue begins. I would then click the Go button. As can be heard, hopefully, the cue has started playing. After the cue has been playing for a while, I might want to introduce another sound cue. In this case, I'm going to start the laughter cue. I click Go again, and the player list panel updates to show the next cue. There's a delay beforehand, and then eventually the sinister laughter will start. Hopefully you can hear this. Now, suddenly, an intense silence is required, so I can click Next Cue, and this will stop the previous cues. It's worth noting that I can also stop cues using the Stop All button, as I can demonstrate. And this immediately stops all cues, which is very useful if something very wrong has happened. This should not be used to stop cues in the middle of a cue list, as it does revert the cue counter to 0. One final thing to mention here is the jump to cue function. If I've decided that for example, the progress on stage is moving too slowly, or I want to quickly skip the next soundtrack, I can right click on a cue and click Jump to Cue. This in this case has stopped all the cues. And I'm now going to close the show mode. I'm happy with what I've done, so I'm going to save it. I'll click File, Save As, and save the project on my desktop for now. I'll call it Macbeth Laugh and click Save. The director I'm working with might like to see what I've done, but he doesn't like using computers very much, so I'm going to click File, Print, and choose my printer and print the file. In this case it's a PDF printer, so it will be saved to the desktop. Now, this has been a quick brief overview of all the functionality of the software. One last thing to show you is how to load cues back in. I'm now able to close the software. I know I've saved it, so I can click No here, and then reload RootCue. Go to File, Open Cue List, locate the cue list in my file system, and click on the Macbeth Laugh RootCue file. As can be seen, the file loads instantly, as cues are not needing to be remapped. I hope this tutorial has been useful and that you enjoy using the RootCue software and that it helps you put on some excellent productions. This has been a tutorial by RootCode Software Project.